I think the point that I would make is that this revolution was the result of very courageous young people. And if Egypt is changing today, it's because the younger generation had the courage to actually stand up for things that previous generation thought of, wanted, but maybe lacked the courage to really stand up for. So it's a great privilege today for us to have two such young people who were really courageous and were part of the changes that took place in Egypt. So the first speaker is Rajia Omran. She's a feminist, a lawyer, and a human rights activist. She's founder of Al-Masri Al-Hur movement, which is translated as the Free Egyptian. And she's also founder of No to Military Trials Against Civilians. She's a member of the Front for the Defense of Egyptian Protesters. Rajia.
Thank you. It gives me great pleasure to be here with you today, although my heart is really in Cairo and Egypt today, because one of the people that I learned about the military trials about, his retrial is today. So I'm torn between being here and being there, but I'll tell you more about the military trials. As Mona spoke just now and said, this revolution was really a people's revolution, and I think that was the strength of our revolution, that we had no leader. We were all there in Tahrir and all the other squares across Egypt. But I'd like to give you a bit of a background about maybe some of the people, the unknown soldiers of this revolution. And it's mainly the people that I work with, which are the human rights organizations and the civil rights groups, who had been for the last 20 years working on defending human rights and civil rights, political rights, maybe not very much known, but they really were the backbone for creating the environment for protest movements like Kifaya, 6th of April, and other groups that all got together prior to January 25th to, call for the going down to the streets. So I always like to kind of mention that when I speak about the Egyptian revolution, so that people who may not know or be familiar with it know that, this was really a collective effort of, youth, civil society, activists, students. So it's not one group alone that put this through. I never expected after the revolution that my work as a human rights activist would take me to the military courts and military prosecution. I had never been there before, even though I had been actively working on human rights abuses prior to the revolution. And it saddens me to say that since January 28th, we've had more than 12,000 Egyptians that have faced military trials, civilians, not members of the army. We discovered the first case as a group in the end of February when we had one Amr al-Bahiri, whose retrial is today, got arrested on February 26th during a sit-in in Tahrir when we were objecting to the Ahmed Shafiq government, and within 48 hours he faced a military trial and was sentenced to 5 years. Since then, the group that I'm part of, which is the No to Military Trials for Civilians, has taken on this issue, and we've become support through free legal advice and support to the families of these victims. We've managed, I think, to put on a successful campaign. Maybe at the beginning we had a lot of resistance from media and from people to actually believe that this would be happening in Egypt post the revolution. However, I think through the perseverance of this group, which is completely volunteer, and I think it's really a great example of how a grassroots movement can come together. And within this group, we have people from all various backgrounds, people who have been activists prior to the revolution, people who became activists, people who don't want to identify themselves as activists but are concerned about the issues. And really, I think this model of this group should be taught in grassroots kind of models. At one point, we had international solidarity campaigns all over the world through the Occupy movements that, you know, if some of you come from the cities where the Occupy movement was, you would see at one point, especially in October and November, many of the people would put up signs saying no to military trials of civilians in Egypt. And I think that's a great success, and it shows how our revolution and all the uprisings and movements this year are really about the power of the people. As for what the current situation is like right now, as Anissa has said, we are expecting in the next 2 weeks, and it's already started now, targeting of a lot of activists who are spoken out, you know, against the abuses that the Supreme Council of Armed Forces has committed against civilians. You know, we've had many protests that have been broken up violently, many injuries, and so many people have lost their eyesight, you know, in this revolution, which is really, really sad. I mean, not just in the 18 days, but up till now, we have people who have lost their eyesight because of the violent breakup of our various protests that took place. So I'm expecting a lot of action in the next 2 weeks, but I think that the perseverance of the people and the support, even though, as Anissa said, maybe we don't see as many numbers, but we know that we have the support of people, even though they may not appear with us in the streets. You know, I mean, when we are in a protest or a sit-in, we all get a lot of calls from people saying, how can I help, how can I support you, you know, and that's how we get, you know, when we set up our field hospitals in Tahrir, you know, we get people donating everything, from blankets to medical supplies to food. And I'd like to point out here that, you know, the media has played a very, very big role in this revolution, and not just the mainstream media, but also the social media, you know, the Twitter and Facebook, etc. It's helped people who maybe would not have had access to information about, you know, activists and protests and where to meet and what to do, to really become part of this movement. And at the same time, the media has also played a negative role in how it's portrayed us, you know, the revolutionaries or the activists. You know, Egypt is a big country, and the TV, the mainstream TV, has a huge influence on generating public opinion. And, you know, at some points, you know, people who would be in Tahrir, who would be accused of being foreign agents, being paid by, you know, being paid from abroad, not designating which abroad this is, to say, you know, that, you know, to break up the country, to cause havoc, to cause chaos, and I think that's the message that, you know, some people don't want to accept, is that we have the power to organize ourselves, we have the power to mobilize, and we don't need anybody to tell us how to do that, you know, and we were able to do it on January 25th, and we will continue to do that until we are able to achieve the revolution's demands. One of the ways I think that the SCAF, the Supreme Council of Armed Forces, is trying to maybe weaken the revolutionaries is by targeting not just, you know, protesters who go out in the streets and stuff, but also well-known activists, media personalities, public personalities. You know, this is a common, every couple of weeks we find, oh, so-and-so has been called in for interrogation because they're accused of inciting violence, accused of speaking out against the army, etc., etc., etc. This has not, you know, the aim of these practices has not been achieved. It's only given power to other people to come out and to speak. And I think the lesson there are so many lessons to be learned from our revolution, but I think really we were, you know, the last 10 years prior to this revolution, we had many struggles and many ups and downs, and I think people who were involved at that time, who knew that change would happen, are now, you know, saying, it's okay, we know it's going to take a time, and it's a very long delivery, But I'm confident that there will be no going back, despite how the picture may appear murky. I don't want to leave you with this, very negative image, because there are so many beautiful stories that have come out from at least the experiences that we've, people we have met. I mean, I think for me the most moving is the mothers of those who have faced military trials. We've met them through our solidarity groups and movements, and these women have joined our No to Military Trials campaign. They've brought in other families. And even though, we were successful in helping some of them get retrialed and their children are out now, they are still part of our campaign. And I think that's like, if it's one thing for me, it's the fact that we were able to reach people that maybe we wouldn't have been able to reach. And these people are spreading the word, and other people will spread the word, and it will continue. This is not a one-year revolution. I think it's going to take several years, and I think the power of the Egyptian people will overcome, and we will be able to achieve what we went down on January 25th of last year to do. Thank you very much.